This is King Island Community Radio and Television. Over the last week, we have spoken to the Premier, we have spoken to the opposition leader. A lot of that talk, of course, on the island was about Saputo, about the dairy, about the cheese, and what is going to be the future. Another member of in our political arena, I should say, is of course Ruth Forrest, our independent member for the Legislative Council for Murchison. It's always a whole mouthful, and I'm curious. I want to know from Ruth also what's going on there. What are her thoughts? Ruth, welcome.
Thanks, Wade. It's always great to chat to you. And of course, the whole King Island dairy is really front and centre of people's concerns and thinking at the moment, as are other challenges on the island. But this has this potential closure, which is we don't seem to have any clear light at the end of the tunnel about anything alternative to that at this point. Has would have a huge impact on the island. So I really feel for the workers out there who seem to be pretty much in the dark, as a lot of us are, in knowing what point are we at. It seems really difficult to get anything concrete out of the government, even from the Office of the Coordinator General, who allegedly is doing all this work in the background, but we don't see any of it. And it's impossible to know whether the end is nigh, or whether there are some legitimate and live proposals. It'd be absolute tragedy to lose this.
What is in big lines, in the bigger lines, as you say, doing the work in the background? What sort of work are we looking at then, Ruth?
We know from the outset that the Premier said this wasn't going to close on his watch, I think was his words specifically. Saputo did indicate that they would sell King Island Dairy. It is a small dairy. It should be focused on niche quality products. And maybe that needs to be revisited by a potential owner to actually look at how do you make a really high quality premium product, not mass produced cheese, for example. But the longer this goes on, Wade, we know that cheese, particularly aged cheese, takes a while to age. And so somewhere along the line, has the decision been made to stop making the harder cheeses, the semi-matured cheeses, all that sort of thing? Because Saputo have basically said that they're not there for the long haul now. This is it. And we do need some certainty for the workers there to avoid losing critical workforce that hopefully if the dairy was purchased, if a new owner structure came along, that we've still got the skills there we need to continue to operate.
Now, a lot of people are also talking about, yeah, but do they want to sell the dairy, the King Island dairy, because that could then become competition for their factory in Burnie? Do you think that it could also be a possibility that their whole plan is to sell King Island dairy, the two farms here on the island, and the Burnie factory, all in one big hit?
Well, I mean, this is a big multinational company, Wade. And in the big scheme of things, obviously King Island Dairy is very small, but the Burnie factory is not that big. I would hope that's not their plan, because that would have huge implications for the northwest region as a whole, unless there was a buyer available. But in terms of selling off a smaller premium product that King Island Dairy is, with the brand that the island cheese has, is small fish to a big multinational like that. And so for them, it may not be an imperative. They could perhaps afford to close it and not sell it. But that would be a huge loss to the island, to Tasmania's brand.
Now, if say the King Island dairy closed and it's all gone and finished, what would you see, or how would you want to look then at say, a recovery plan for the island, the future of the island? You've been here plenty of times. Where do you think that the focus should go then?
Well, I think, as we know, Way, that beef farming, for example, doesn't require the same number of people on the island to run that. And while we have a fantastic and very high quality beef product, the King Island cheese and dairy has been a really important part of it. And we know it makes up a large portion of the freight task to and from the island. So if you lose that, you undermine your freight service, you undermine we remove a number of families from the schools, from the accessing healthcare, from the volunteer base that we rely on so heavily on King Island for SES, fire, ambulance services. And it can become a real challenge to even attract things. And you'll even have trouble with your footy teams. Like we know now that the three teams do share players in the week that's a bye. If you can't field two teams, that's really quite a tragic outcome for the island as well. Now, people might not think those things are important, but they're terribly important in a small community. So I think it's really difficult to contemplate a situation where this is not part of King Island's future. And I think the government need to work really hard on looking at not just a big entity coming in or someone like that to buy the factory, which may or may not succeed, but what does it really need to look like? Is there a different, completely innovative way of restructuring this and enabling the cheese factory to continue, whether it's exactly in its current format or not? Probably not. But let's look at how we can make that happen, because it's such an important and critical part of the King Island community and economy.
Yeah, because normally when we say cheese, we like to put a smile on people's faces, but it looks a little bit different at present, isn't it?
It must be extraordinarily stressful for the families and workers that work there, because it just seems to me that they don't have any more idea of what's going on than I do, or anybody else for that matter. Maybe the government do know more, maybe they're not telling us. But it seems like every time there's a bit more pressure put on, we're suddenly told, oh, we're in negotiations now, we might have a buyer, or we might have this. Then it goes quiet again, like almost, shut everyone up for a while. And then after a while, people say, well, what's happening? They say, oh, well, that one didn't come through. It's the lack of communication, the lack of anything concrete, I guess, for the communities to hang on to say, well, where is our future here?
Now, away from the cheese, Ruth, I was asked last week by somebody. You talk a fair bit with Ruth Forrest, member for the Legislative Council. I said, yeah. And what is actually the Legislative Council? And I said, well, maybe it's better that when I talk to her next, that I'll let her give a bit of a spiel of what is actually the job and what is actually happening there. So here you go.
Yeah, well, in Tasmania, we have a bicameral parliament, which means two houses, and we're part of the state parliament. So the lower house, which is the House of Assembly, is where government's formed. That's where you have the major party involvement, and where the Premier and the Treasurer and all the other ministers sit. We do have some ministers in the upper house, but it's more common for the majority of them to be in the lower house. The Legislative Council is effectively a house of review. So our job is to scrutinise legislation when it comes through from the lower house, which it generally originates from. We look at it, we just determine whether we believe it's appropriate, whether it does what it says it's going to do. It's not going to create unintended consequences as much as we possibly can. And is it good policy? Is this good for Tasmania as a whole, or a group of Tasmanians? The other important work we do is committee work, where we look at various aspects of government administration, or I chair the Public Accounts Committee, which has been doing a lot of work on the stadium for one thing, the UTAS financial position another, and then the TT line debacle, we'll call it, with the delay in the delivery of the Spirit vessels because of the lack of a berth in Devonport. So we look at public expenditure there. So there's a whole range of work that goes on in committees. That's just one of them that we can particularly focus in on areas that we just don't have time or necessarily the capacity to look at in a parliamentary sitting week. So a lot of that work goes on, but the other key part is engaging with the community, understanding what my fairly large and quite disparate community, what matters to them. Now, we've got people on King Island have very different, though some common needs, to people in Circular Hair, people in Waitawhinya, people in Burnie, and people on the West Coast. So it's getting around the electorate, hearing from people what it is they need, responding directly through my office to people who come and need a bit of help with a particular problem. That's a lot of work is done that way as well. So that's a bit of a snapshot, Wade. It's a really important role in holding the government of the day to account as a check and balance, as opposed to, we're not an opposition, we're there to hold the government to account through the scrutiny of what the decisions they make.
Mm. Now, we're going to be back in 3 minutes, Ruth, because what I'm going to do, because there was another person that came with a question and said, I often watch videos and online that Ruth Forrest is asking questions on behalf of King Island. My feeling is that she never ever gets a satisfactory answer to those questions. And I've got a little video here that I put together. It's about 3 minutes. Let's have a look at it and I'll get back to you.
So today we're announcing some key initiatives around health, and very pleased over the course of the last couple of years I was opening the King Island District Hospital, a brand new upgrades there which is fantastic and I know been very well received. Today I'm announcing a $5 million commitment to a brand new ambulance station on the island. Not only that, what is important is to support our volunteers. All the ambulance services at the moment enabled by volunteer paramedics. What we're going to do is put two permanent community paramedics on the island. Permanent.
When do we start building? Any indicators there, or?
Well, as soon as possible. And the budget is going through the Parliament right now. It was announced yesterday. It's there in black and white in terms of the commitments we made as part of our 2030 strong plan for Tasmania's future. King Island has always been a very important part of our government and its initiatives. The budget's the budget. It's there in black and white, and I look forward to those commitments, including those to organisations such as Phoenix House, rolling out in the very near future.
Yeah, so I don't have anything further to update from when you spoke with the Premier. So ambulance is actually I suppose one part of the emergency services that sits with my colleague, the Health Minister. I know he's working through those details, but it's a $5 million investment, as you know, co-located with the hospital, which is actually a much better outcome because our ambulance teams and the hospital need to be working in closely together. So that's a major investment for the island, and it's going to be a big increase in the ability to make sure that we can get King Islanders to the healthcare that they need as quickly as possible and as safely as possible. So we'll continue to work through those details. The budget's just been handed down and it's been funded in the budget. So that's encouraging, and we want to make sure that we get it right.
Has any honourable member a question without notice? The honourable member for Murchison.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question is the Honourable Leader. With regard to the progress of the ambulance facility on King Island, noting it was part of the Liberal election promises and added to the budget of the 2024-25. Recently, both the Premier and Minister Ellis assured King Island media that the project would start soon. My questions are, 1, have plans been finalised? 2, what is the expected starting date for construction works? And 3, what is the date that this facility is expected to be available to the King Island Ambulance volunteers to occupy?
The Honourable Leader of the Government.
The Honourable Member for her question. So the Tasmanian Government continues to progress our commitment to build a new ambulance station on King Island as per our election commitment. An initial concept design has been developed in consultation with Ambulance Tas, with a detailed design expected to be completed in March 25.
Yeah, and it's part of a broader, I think, the 27 more paramedics across the state, including 2 on King Island.
Starting
as soon as possible. I'll get that date for you, but looking forward to that as well. It's a commitment of ours, recognising, of course, that the volunteers have played such a crucial role over the course of forever, and having those 2 community paramedics will make a big difference.
Well, that was a little bit about ambulance hub and paramedics. Is it true, Ruth, that it must be frustrating sometimes, and I'll see you now and again responding to quite neatly and making saying something, but I think you must think something different in some way, because it must be frustrating.
It is frustrating, way, but there are. It is important to be parliamentary when we're in Parliament. So sometimes what I might say may not be entirely what I think, but it is really frustrating when I've been asking repeatedly for a number of years now for an actual timeline and delivery date of our new ambulance station and the delivery of the community paramedics. Now, with the community and myself too have advocated for this for a number of years now, and the government have acknowledged that yes, indeed, we should not be entirely relying on our amazing volunteers in the ambulance service there for lots of reasons. It becomes difficult to get enough volunteers, and to be a volunteer with an ambulance service is very difficult at times because you almost certainly know the person you're going to be attending to in the ambulance. So they can have a psychological impact on people who need to take some time away after such an incident. So those are the reasons why we need trained and community-based paramedics, as well as the fact that the facilities that the ambulance volunteers have been working out of have been for such a long time. There was a period of time when they had to use a portaloo. They had nowhere to change after an incident might have involved being exposed to bodily fluids and things like that. So to get the constant pushback, I guess you might say, or soon or imminently, or it's on the go. Yes, we're in the planning stage. It does beg belief as to how it can take so long to actually determine a site, get the site approved, and then get on with building and recruiting. But I think the reality is until there's a new facility, we're not going to be able to attract a community paramedic to King Island. So it's a chicken and an egg thing here. So it is frustrating, Wayne. I get very frustrated on behalf of the community because I know the volunteers particularly put so much effort into this work and they're very dedicated, and I'm sure at times they feel quite disrespected.
Hey, for example, you spend a lot of time also on the questions, hey, when are we going to do something about Grassy Port? There's an overburden in 25 from the mine, make it an all-weather port, maybe dredge it out, bigger ships can come in. Then a few times you had answers on behalf of the Minister for Transport at the time. Hey, you got answers like King Island doesn't need a second port. You never asked for a second port for starters. Now, we finally then last year with the elections in March or April, the promise came. We're going to put in $150,000 for a feasibility study. Studies have been done already. Now, when I asked last week, I asked the Premier, how are we going with that feasibility study? Well, it was still like, yeah, it is happening. But when I asked, what is the outcome we want from that study? Because I'm a simple journalist, I always think, well, when you do a study, you do that for an outcome. Can you imagine? Well, you get frustrated. I get frustrated too.
So we actually need to see the terms of reference, if you like, for that feasibility study. Are they looking at the feasibility of building a second port somewhere in the vicinity? Are they looking at the feasibility of using some of the waste rock from the mine to build onto the current breakwater to create a safe harbour? I was very frustrated. One of our hearings most recently to have TasPorts tell me that there's no such thing as an all-weather port when they knew what I was talking about. I was talking about a port that enabled boats to go in or ships to go into a safe area in rough weather when they can't get into the grassy harbour. It's just really frustrating where your words are twisted and your genuine request for assistance for the island, particularly reliable, reliable in terms of safe, timely and regular shipping service, and also a safe harbour for smaller vessels that may find themselves caught up in the rough weather that we know can happen around King Island. That's why there's so many shipwrecks in the area. We know it can be treacherous seas out there, and it's unconscionable that we don't have a proper grown-up discussion about this. And then we have a feasibility study promise with no clear outline, as you said, Wade, about what are we actually trying to understand the feasibility of.
Can you imagine
this is another way of trying to shut me up.
Can you understand that there's plenty of people out there that say politics, don't bother me with it.
Yeah, I do understand that. And I mean, I keep doing it because every now and then you do get wins, Wade. It takes a while sometimes. But I think I really am passionate about listening to the community, trying to take the community's voice and wishes forward, acknowledging there'll be differing views on some things. Like some people might think we absolutely need to strengthen or update or build a new breakwater there at the wharf, for example, or we absolutely have to do something. And other people might say, well, actually, no, that's not the best use of our money. So there'll always be differing views.
Well, it is about time for your yearly visit.
Well, I'm usually a bit more than yearly, but I try and spend about 4 or 5 days around the show time. For one, it's always my birthday on King Island, so it's always a really special place to have my birthday away. But it's a good time for me to come and spend a few days because you can catch up with people at the show, but you can also, catch up with a lot of people before and after the show. So no one goes to the show, and sometimes it's not always easy to catch up with everyone there, but it is a great opportunity.
When you're here this time, you'd like to do a bit, and we've done it in the past, also a bit of almost like a community event, isn't it? There's sort of a little bit of a place where people can gather, can ask questions and sort of, have a bit of a Q&A with you.
Yeah, so I'm hoping, Wayne, on the Monday to spend a bit of time just having like a drop-in session, if you like, so people could come and talk to me, raise their concerns with me. At the show, I like to sort of get around and go and look at the exhibits and talk to people where they are. So I'll be interested to know whether people think that's a value, if people think that they'd find that helpful on the Monday afternoon, early evening, to be able to just drop in, say outside the pub or somewhere, just give people a chance to come and go as they like, race matters, nothing formal, just to get the feedback of the community in town where people are sort of getting ready to go home from work or getting the kids home, getting dinner ready, that sort of thing.
Well, people, I'm going to put here an email address. You can write to that if you like and even ask questions. You can even leave your comments here if you have a question for Ruth when she's here, and she can prepare a little bit, which would be good. Forrest, we thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure, Wade. Thanks for the opportunity.